Welcome back to the Midday Mumbles Podcast, episode 42. Today, we are with Mr. LePage, former Governor of Maine. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, wonderful.
You recently moved back from Florida.
That is correct.
How was Florida?
Hot, very hot. Hot in many ways.
Are you glad to be back to Maine?
Yes, I love Maine.
You love Maine?
Maine is my home, and I'm real glad to be back.
Yeah, it's glad to have you back. So you've made a lot of news. People are speculating you're running for governor again.
That is correct. I am looking into running again in the next election.
Are you excited to get back into politics?
I wouldn't say I'm excited. I'm going back in because I believe I have the proper skill set to turn the state around again. I left it in pretty good shape, and with some, what I would say, mismanagement in the first year of the new administration, and COVID hitting right behind that the state is in dire straits.
So obviously, your life is a very interesting story, right? I think it's very interesting, and I think it's a great example of the American dream. Working your way up. So, how do you think your upbringing affected your view on economic issues, such as, poverty and welfare?
Well, what it did is it formed, having been grown up in it, I understood it. I was part of it. I mean, I remember at 7, 8 years old, I'd have to go to the surplus store and pick up the dried milk and the cheese and the surplus that was given from I believe it was the military was giving it to states, and states would distribute it to the poor. So I guess it set the foundation early. I started working very early. I was about 9 years old, my first job, and I've worked ever since. And so what I did is it gave me a sense of responsibility on finances. That you've got to be conservative, otherwise you're going to go without meal.
So with that being said, do you still share the same types of mentalities as you would have back then, or have life experiences and different economic opportunities shifted your mentality on really anything?
No, I don't believe my mentality's changed. I believe a society has to have a very, very strong social network and a safety net for those who cannot. And I honestly believe that the safety net includes people with intellectual disabilities, the elderly, and certainly those who cannot take care of themselves and that are stuck in poverty. And I do believe, however, that poverty can become a way of life and a structure. So you have to want to get out, and you have to work to get out. You can't expect government to come in and take you out. You've got to be willing to work at it. So I'm a big believer, if you help yourself, I'll be right there helping you. If you refuse to help yourself, then it's going to be hard to help you and to get you out of poverty.
What motivated you, right? I mean, there were so many things that could have brought you down, but what motivated you to rise above the rest and create an amazing life?
2 families, 2 foster families, the Myrick family from Auburn, Maine, and the Collins family from Lewiston. They provided me the opportunity to work and encouragement to want to, continue in my schooling, go to college, and I've always wanted to better myself. So it was just a matter of hard work. And I've always had a great work ethic, and that was what made it all work.
So I would imagine that would be what you'd tell young people who are in impoverished situations, that they just need to work extra hard at it, sort of deal.
Well, it's really funny as you say that, because just last week there's a young man who's at Bath Iron Works. They're on strike now, unfortunately, but he was on the picket line, and he sent me an email through a friend. He sent me his contact information, and he said, "You turned my life around. You spoke at Lewiston High School when I was going to school, and your story turned my life around, and I got the ambition to go to work." Now he's a welder at Bath Iron Works, doing very well as soon as they get back to work, unfortunately. And he's real proud of himself. And so I take a little bit of comfort
Right.
And someone like that has picks himself up and gives me credit for helping him.
You must feel good when you inspire young people to do better and strive for more than just
I'll tell you,
what's
there's
available.
a nurse who works in Bangor,
Right.
and she sent me a letter. She said, in 2011, when you were elected, when you took office, I did not vote for you. I hated you. I thought you were gonna. I was on welfare. I had 2 children. I thought you were gonna take me off welfare and throw me to the dogs. And she said, but by listening to you after you became governor, you inspired me to go to community college, to nursing school. Then I got my RN. Now I'm at, she works in Bangor at the hospital, and she's a full nurse. And she says, I have health insurance. I have a car. My kids, we're not on welfare. We take nothing. We provide for ourselves. And now I'm her hero. So I went from being the bad guy to being the good guy. And so that really, really makes you proud of yourself and proud of the things that you've done, because you've helped a couple of people make it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed in my own life that when I'm talking to people, and when they disagree with you for a while, and then eventually you get them to agree with you, that's a really rewarding feeling. And
it's
Right.
really rewarding when somebody will call you and ask for help. I mean, I had a young gal when I was governor. She was 17 years old. Her mother had remarried, and unbeknownst to the mother, or she told the mother that her new husband was hitting on her, and the mother didn't believe her. So she called me as a governor and said, what do I do? And I said, I'll find somebody to get in touch with you and work with you. And we've got a lawyer to work pro bono and got her emancipated from this household. Got her an apartment. She finished her high school, and went on to college. Very, very inspiring young lady. And that all happened because on a Saturday morning, she had the nerve to call the governor's office and talk to her.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So there's
Really
been
is.
great stories like that. I've had several of those happen. I remember a young 9-year-old comes in with his grandmother on a Saturday morning when I used to have these office hours, and people could just come in and talk to me. And he tells me that he's 9 years old and his sister's 6, and he's from a divorced family. And he says, I can take it. He says, I don't mind going to visit my dad. I can take it. But I really worry when he beats up my daughter, my sister, his daughter. And I said, oh, is that right? So Monday morning, we made a few phone calls, and he still sees his children, but is under supervised visitations until he gets his anger out of control.
So I wondered this, with the whole poverty conversation, there is a lot of poverty in Maine.
There's no question.
Right. And there's a lot of speculation on how to solve that issue. And something that's very much up for debate is minimum wage. Do you think raising the minimum wage helps, make less people in poverty, or?
No, it hurts them.
Yeah.
It hurts them. Minimum wage is not how you get out of poverty. Nobody's going to get out of poverty on a minimum wage. The only way to get minimum wage is minimum wage has to be a training wage. It's for those very, very young people who are starting out. That's what I look as minimum wage. The only way to get out of poverty is to get skill sets,
right,
to develop a skill. And the skills is either through a trade school or some form of schooling or some form of training. You have to aspire for more and more and more. You get an entry-level job and you work hard to get the next promotion. A good example would be Pratt & Whitney down in Berwick. What they do is they work with the community college system. The kids that go in take courses, and then they work. They do half-time studying, half-time working. And so they're working their way into a skill, a lifetime skill that they can earn a decent living on. From Bath Iron Works is another good example where they'll bring in an apprentice, they'll teach them welding, they'll teach them mill work, they'll teach them pipe fitting, and there's all kinds of different things that can be taught. And they climb the ladder and they get into wage levels of $30 and $40 an hour. That's a living wage. Minimum wage will never be a living wage. The problem with minimum wage, by increasing it beyond the ability of businesses to absorb, it's not going to affect Bath Iron Works or large companies like Pratt Whitney, but it affects the small entrepreneurs who start out, And that's where you take the incentive of those who could start a business and try to develop their own nest egg. You take that away from them, and they can't afford to do it. For instance, when the minimum wage goes from $8 to $12, many of our nursing homes in the state went under. Why? Because they depend on the state to give them more money. Well, they raise the minimum wage, but did not increase the reimbursement to nursing homes. They can't afford, so they reduce quality, they reduce services, and then they go out of business.
Why do you think that, most times when people talk about why do you think the debate is up for minimum wage? Why do you think many people want to raise it?
Because it sounds good. And generally, it's one party versus the other. The Republican Party generally doesn't like minimum wage. They love a living wage. The Democratic Party tends to always want to higher minimum wage. For instance, right now, we're at $12. So some people that I know were working 40 hours, and when they went up to $12, their benefits were cut because now they're going to pay more per hour, and their hours were cut. So they're literally making the same amount of money that they were at $10 or at $8. So the issue becomes finding efficiencies and profitability for the company by getting the people better skills so they're more valuable to the company.
And I mean, like you said, the entrepreneurs, that's important too. I mean, small businesses can't afford to pay increased minimum wage. So, there are a lot of people in Maine that are working 4 jobs at minimum wage apiece. What should they do? What do you think they should do?
What they should be doing, and I'm a big fan of the community college system. Community college system has many trade opportunities, and you can go in and learn a trade rather than working 4 jobs. I would say work 2 and study at 2. Take some time to try to get yourself a skill. And I'll tell you, businesses that can get skilled workers, they're all in. In fact, this morning, I'll give you an example. This morning, I was had some work done on my car, so I was in the showroom in Waterville, and the human resource person there, we were talking, she says, I can't wait till the community colleges open up again. That's where we get all our technicians.
Right.
They train them. They get some basic book training there, and they get some hands-on training. Then we bring them in, and we get them certified into a skill. And so we'll get them in here at $12 to $15. We get them certified, and they jump to $25. And they're helping our business. Without them, they don't have technicians. And she says, as people retire, we can't replace them. So they're very concerned that this year they're getting zero. They're getting a big fat zero of students coming in because the schools are closed. There's no graduates.
Right, right.
And they're very, very concerned about it. So I would say that the best opportunity in Maine and the best education in Maine at an affordable price is the community college system. And you can get into trades. And I'll tell you, I know teachers that start out at $30,000, the plumbers make $60,000. Yeah. I know an electrician who's making just under $100,000, and he's in his 20s. Yeah. So trades are really good paying jobs.
Speaking of jobs, though, and speaking of climbing up the ladder, how did you do that before you got into politics?
Well, basically, I got my bachelor's degree out of Husson College. From there, I went into working as a bookkeeper. I worked my way from bookkeeper to general manager of some sawmills. Then I was hired by Scott Paper. After I got my master's, the first few years I was working. Then I went back to school, got my master's degree. Then Scott Paper hired me as a manager. And then from there, I became a controller. And from there, I started my own company. And then I went into consulting for like 20 years. And then I ended up running Martin's before I became governor.
And what led you to wanting to become governor?
It's strange. I had no political aspirations whatsoever until 1998. And I was living in Waterville. And the mayor of Waterville sold a 15 parcel of land. She wanted to sell a 15-acre parcel of land on the river to a relative for $1. So I went in and offered $50,000, and they refused it, and they sold it for $1. I then proceeded to run, got on the council, got rid of that mayor. Then I ran for mayor, and then we fixed it. And then from there, in 2010, I was approached by some people saying, the city of Waterville is doing really good. Why don't you run for governor? Because the state's in big trouble. And at that time, my wife and I were talking about slowing down and maybe considering retirement in a couple of years. And so I told my wife, why don't we just try for the governorship? It's time. We've done very well. Let's time to give back to the state. I've been very, very fortunate in the state of Maine. The state of Maine helped me get off the streets and become general manager of Martin's and the governor of the state of Maine. So it was my time to give back. We gave back and it worked out. We got 8 years as governor.
Right. How did you used to be the mayor of Waterville. How was that experience?
That was interesting. I mean, the best government is local government. The closer you are to the people, the better governance you're going to have. I was the first Republican elected in 35 years. I was elected mayor 3 times. I left there. When I got there, they had less than $1 million in the bank. I left. We had reduced taxes by 20% with $10 million in the bank. So I think my finance experience and training really helped me in the numbers game. And so I was able to fix that city. And then some of the people in the city saw, wow, the state's in trouble. Let's move on to the next project.
Speaking of the state, though, and speaking of trouble, what really was it like? Because, I mean, me and Gage, we were very young at that time that you first got elected. How was that? Because I feel a lot of people wouldn't know.
When I took over, we owed the hospital $750 million of unpaid bills, which meant that it wasn't even on the books. We just had an IOU to the hospitals. We owed them $750 million. The previous governor had leased out the liquor business for $10 million a year. So we were getting $10 million a year in liquor sales. We had $1 billion shortfall in the government. So what I did is I came in, we shrunk the government by attrition. In other words, we didn't lay people off, but we offered people early retirements and those type of things to reduce the headcount. There was 14,000 people working for the state at the time. I reduced it to 11,900. So that created a fairly sizable surplus, and then we just saved it. We put it away, and we were a lean, mean machine, and we ran an austerity program, and we were not wasteful. I had the smallest staff since Ken Curtis back in the 60s. I had 19. There were 19 people on the governor's staff. The previous governor had 29. So that's what we did. We just shrunk things. We looked for efficiencies, and we changed. We invested in some programming, some new technologies, and we closed some offices. So we just shrunk our business and looked for surpluses. I brought the liquor business back in-house. The liquor business generates about $55 million a year, and we were only getting 10 a year. So now we've got a plus of 45 million right there.
From you saying that, I would imagine you don't believe in necessarily very large government.
I believe a government should be only as large as the most, it should be, the size of government should meet the services required by the citizens and no more. In other words, you don't have any excesses, you don't have extra bodies, you have what you need to run an efficient austerity program that you can make sure that everybody gets the services. I'll give you an example. Welfare. I believe in a real strong safety net. I believe in the elderly. I believe in mentally ill people should get assistance. I believe those that are really down and out that are trying should get help.
Right.
But I do not believe that a person who's able to go to work and refuses to work and to help himself, that I should be the one providing his services. I do not believe in the current program of buying cars for people on welfare. I think that's outrageous because they can't afford it. If they're on welfare, they can't afford the insurance, they can't afford the excise tax, they can't afford the maintenance. If they do, they're taken away from the supper table, and I don't think that's appropriate. So
in the welfare system, you want less people on it, less people that don't actually need it on it. But how do you tell who needs it and who doesn't when you're in a government standpoint?
You can easily tell. Believe me, there's a million different ways of telling. You can tell on how people spend their money. You can tell if people are spending their money on medicine and food and they don't have any extra, they're in need. But if you're going to Las Vegas and Disney World and you're still on welfare and you're able-bodied, but you refuse to go to work, that's a problem.
A follow-up question to the welfare system. I've seen this before. I've seen people have their EBT card. They get the cash from the ATM, then they go and they buy liquor and cigarettes. What's your thought on that?
Or I'll tell you, they'll take in 2015, we put pictures on EBT cards. And you know why we did that? Because every time we do a drug bust, we'd get 4 or 5 EBT cards. So I thought drug dealers were selling EBT cards. It turns out the EBT cards were for people on welfare. They were using the EBT card to pay for their drugs.
Yeah.
But by putting a picture on it, nobody wants to see their picture out there.
You are going to make America great again.
Did you hear that? That's my phone ringing.
Yeah, that's a cool ringtone. So yeah, a family member of mine is a small business owner. They used to own a little general store. And what would happen is there'd be a lot of people that would use the ATM, like I said, and they'd buy cigarettes and liquor. And one of the circumstances was this person was known in town. They had a bunch of kids. The kids went hungry every night, and this person would come in every day, buy 2 packs of cigarettes, buy all kinds of brandy, and they'd neglect their kids. And I think that's very disgusting.
That's also we found people using it to buy lottery tickets.
Yeah,
we'd have people that would take an EBT card and go buy $50 worth of lottery tickets on a Wednesday night or a Saturday night, a Saturday afternoon. And so what they were doing, they were using that money to try to make the big windfall while
right.
the children weren't being fed. We had one gentleman that used to, who was on EBT, had $5,800 on his EBT card, and he was saving it for trips. He never used the money. The money kept adding up, and when he get enough money, he'd go on a trip.
Wow.
Those we got him out of there pretty quick. We had several people we caught living in Florida, living in Arizona on EBT cards and say, when are you coming back home? All your expenditures are in Florida. Oh, I don't intend to come back home. So we cut those cards off. So yes, there's all kinds of different things that are done. I remember this is the most egregious one. In 2014, it's either 14 or 15, we traced some EBT cards, and in 1 year, over $10 million went from one Western Union office in Maine to Africa.
Wow.
Every month, there were deposits that were sent over, and we accumulated over $10 million.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of fraud.
Yeah. I hope they were put away.
And guess what? We reported it to the Obama administration, and they did nothing.
You would think that understanding fraudulent behavior as evil would be kind of bipartisan, but
It should be. And in many cases, it is. I will say this for the people in Maine and the legislature. I will say there were people on both sides of the aisle. A lot of Democrats and Republicans really worked hard to fight that. But I will say that the current governor, we sent her 257 or something like that. The number was well into the 200s of fraud investigations, and she only prosecuted a handful.
Wow. Makes you think of what they're actually doing. Kind of shifting gears here. When you first were elected into office, what policy or policies were you most passionate about?
Child abuse is one of my biggest ones.
Right.
I lived through a very severe time of abuse, and I'll tell you, domestic violence is a major problem in the state of Maine, and that's been one that I've been very, very hands-on about. And so that was a big one. Streamlining welfare was important.
Right.
In other words, trying to find the fraud and make sure that the fraud is eliminated, and we use the funds that we discover that we can get out that are fraudulent and put them into areas where we can help people. Those are two big areas. And then the other one, and I think it's something, there are two other areas that are very, very important, and we were not as successful as I would have liked to have been. But as soon as we fix those two problems, Maine's going to prosper. One is taxes. Our taxes are way too high. We need to reduce the taxes and let people have money in their pocket instead of government taking it and spending it for them. That's one issue. And while we had the largest tax decrease in the history of the state, unfortunately believe that it's going to be reversed in January because of COVID. Secondly is energy. We have the 10th highest cost of energy in the United States. There is no reason for that. The reason it's so expensive is because of wind and solar, and we do not allow hydro.
Right.
If we did that, this whole issue with the transmission line from Quebec is what I'm talking about. We could literally be buying power from Canada for like 6 cents a kilowatt hour, but we're putting windmills and solar panels on roofs and charging people 12, 15, 20 cents.
So why wouldn't we be buying power? Because it's green energy and people are worried about keeping energy green, but hydropower is green.
That's correct. Now, in every place in the world except for the state of Maine, and that's the key. You hit on the most important thing, and you young people, if you can reach young people, you should be able to be sure you get them this information. In the state of Maine, if you have under 100 megawatts of hydro, it's green power. The minute you get over 100 megawatts, it becomes brown power. It's a law that's put in by the Democratic Party. It's been there for 20 years. I've been trying to eliminate it for 8 of for the whole time I was there. We tried to get them to eliminate and make hydro green. The reason the power is going to southern New England is because they won't sell it to us because they call it green and we call it brown. And so they don't want to sell us over 100 megawatts. So it's nothing but politics at its worst.
Why do we allow this behavior?
Because the majority of the legislature and the majority of the Senate are Democrat. And in the 2 years that we had a Republican governor, Republican House, and a Republican Senate, unfortunately, the Senate didn't want to change it.
If it's in the best interest for the state, I don't understand. It doesn't really make any sense. Why wouldn't everyone be interested in doing what's in the best interest for?
It might be in the best interest of the state, but maybe not in the best interest of the politician. It all boils down to follow the money.
Right.
These lobbyists come to Augusta and they will give you lots of money to support their bills. That's the issue.
Do you get offered money, or did you get offered money when you were governor?
Oh my God, I could have been rich. I'll tell you, when I was governor, I was making a heck of a lot more money as an employee of Martin's than I did as governor. And many governors and some governors in the past made a lot of money being governor. I literally came out of the governorship poorer than I went in.
Not many people would want to do that. So I thank you for that. Your 2 terms as governor, you did a lot of positive for Maine, but you also were very highly criticized. A lot of people were.
Certainly. I was criticized by the universities and I was criticized by the media. And if you take a look at the media and the universities, they're very, very left of center.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, in 8 years, the Bangor Daily News never wrote one positive article on me in 8 years. Now, even a blind squirrel will find an acorn. So I could not have been that bad. I was 100% bad in their eyes. And so the way I look at it is written press is so bad you can't even trust the obituaries.
Yeah, you're right. So do you think that your first and second terms were successful, or do you think you were just constantly fighting back and forth with getting laws passed that you thought needed to be passed?
Oh, I think it was a battle all the way through. The first 2 years were not nearly as bad because we had the House and Senate. And while I don't think we did nearly as much as we should have done and could have done, because even internal strife within the parties, I think we did some good things, but there was a lot more we could have done.
Right.
The rest of the time, I just got a little bit smarter, and we worked really hard. And it was more important in the second term because the Democrats ran everything, both the House and the Senate. It was more important to be able to stop bad legislation than rather than having any hope of passing good legislation.
Mhm.
So I think I hold the record for the most vetoes of any governor.
Yeah.
All the previous governors put together, I think I had more vetoes.
I think it's like
I was
600.
I was looking at it on Wikipedia, and I think it did say 600 and something.
Yeah. That's a lot. That's a lot.
But I guess it is better to stay at where you are than digress farther, you know?
Yeah. You want to try to prevent from getting worse. I'll tell you one of the most ridiculous laws that was ever put on the books in the state of Maine. That's besides having the blueberry pie and the brownie. One's a dessert and the other one's a snack or something. We had spent 2 weeks deciding that. That was ridiculous. But one of the most ridiculous laws that I've ever heard of is if you're a foreign national and you move to Maine, and in your country, let's say you're in Somalia or Sudan or Afghanistan or wherever you come from, if you had a crime against society or a sexual crime, sexual deviant crime, and you come to Maine, you're required to voluntarily put yourself on a sex offender list. Now, the law's been in place for about 4 years. And I checked when I got back to Maine this year. Nobody's signed up yet because it's voluntary.
Well, that should just why is it voluntary?
Yeah, what is required voluntary even mean?
Exactly.
I mean, that's just ridiculousness. Do the politicians understand that they're just wasting time?
That's exactly what they were doing. And the problem is this. There are two. It's basically structural.
Right.
Number one is the government in Maine is too big for the size of the state, for the population state, not the size, but the population.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 151 members and in the House, and then you have 35 senators. You should be able to do it all with 90 people, and I would make it a professional. In other words, I would have term limits, but you would have to be a trained professional. You'd have to study politics before you get into politics and get paid a reasonable rate of pay. They don't get a lot of money, so only people that are either self-sufficient, independently wealthy, or are not working because their spouse is the breadwinner, they can go into government, or you're retired. So young people, family people, it's very, very seldom that you'll see anybody young in there because they can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're living at home and they're being supported in another way. So it's a structural problem. And so we don't get the best and the brightest. And then now that the parties are so far apart, you have a socialist wing and you have a capitalist wing. They're so far apart that and there's so much hatred in politics that nobody wants to do it.
Right. Isaac and I talk about this on the podcast all the time. There really aren't that many new fresh faces in politics. I mean, it is, for one, very expensive to run.
Yes.
And, we talk all the time about new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about how young people have good ideas, but also older people are wiser because they have a lot more experiences in life. So, but there just aren't a lot of new faces. And one of the biggest things that I despise in politics is career politicians. And there are a lot of career politicians.
Yes, absolutely. And, I spent my 8 years there. I left. You have to leave, and that's fine. And, if there was a really bright person with the skill set necessary to turn the state around running, I would step aside. But right now, Janet Mills is the governor. She's been paid by the state of Maine her entire career, either as a DA, attorney general, in the legislature. We have John Martin, who's been in the legislature since 1964, with the exception of 2 years. All but 2 years since 1964, he hasn't been in the legislature. And what he does, there's term limits, so he goes 8 years in the House, then 8 years in the Senate, 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate. And that's doable. That's fine. So what I would do is I think you should have a term limit one time in it, whether it's 12 years, 10, 12 years, whatever you want to have it. You got to have it long enough so you can have an impact.
Mhm.
8 years is actually a little bit light because it takes you 4 years to learn it. And then this is what I used to say. It takes you 4 years to learn where the bathroom is, 2 years to clean it, and then you're effective.
Right. And another thing that we like to talk about, not only career politicians, is, and this isn't just statewide politics, this is national politics as a whole. It seems like most voters vote nowadays, whether there's a D or an R next to the candidate's name. And, we've talked about, what if we didn't have political parties, or what if political parties were done away with? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think we'd be able to get more done?
You bring up a good point, and it's very, very interesting. What is really happening now, you have the Democrat and the Republican Party, and they have their base. So I would say that 30% roughly, let's say roughly 30% of Republicans, 30% are Democrat. Maybe it's sometimes a little bit of imbalance, but generally speaking, 60% of the population belong to party. 50 years ago, it was like 85%. So what's happening is a lot of people are getting out of the party and they're becoming unenrolled, independent unenrolls. And that's growing. They are the single largest group right now. There's over 40% of the population is not attached to either party. So you're bringing up a very, very good point. As more corrupt that the party system gets, and as nasty as it gets, people are dropping out, and then they're voting for the person rather than the party. So I would urge you young people to continue doing that.
Right.
That's the direction you want to go. That's how you get rid of parties.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the big things is a lot of young people, especially, are avoiding politics because if they're affiliated with a Republican, most Democrats call Republicans racist, and that there's those false things attached to it, and then Democrats as well. So young people are steering away from controversial politics, and they're just going about their lives without it. And I think it's really going to hurt the elections because there aren't going to be many people voting in the future.
Yeah, it's gonna. You're absolutely correct. It's going to hurt elections, and it does hurt elections. And in some states, 50% is a good turnout. Maine is usually around 70, 75%. New Hampshire is always above 75% in voting. There's a system their system of government, live free or die, and they really believe that down there in New Hampshire, that they've been relatively effective and very successful state. Texas is another one. Texas, their legislature, it's a professional legislature, but they only meet like I think they only vote on bills 3 weeks every 2 years.
Right.
There's a lot of meetings and a lot of work that leads up to it. But the bills are they're short, sweet, and to the point, and you move in and move out. So yes, smaller, more professional would attract young people into the system. Also, the fact that they don't want the nastiness, they can't afford to. If they've got any desire to have a family, a young family can't be in politics.
Hey, I'm Gage from the Midday Mumbles Podcast. I strongly believe if you want to start a podcast today for free, you need Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. And the best part is, it's completely free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer anytime. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard across all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more epic platforms available for free. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started today for free. Again, that's Anchor.fm. One more time, that's ANCHOR.fm. I can't wait to see what you create.
You were speaking about that we need to shorten the time that people are actually voting. I've noticed as a young person that's now 19, and when I've been trying to look into voting on stuff, it's very easy to just miss some sort of bill that you even might have cared about. It's just like it went by, you didn't notice, and it's done with. What is your feeling on that? Like, I mean, I guess you already said your feeling, but
what I tried to do when I was as governor, I was trying to get, like, we have a national C-SPAN every day. If you're interested in bills, they'll give you an agenda of what they're going to be talking about. And if there's certain bills you like, you can go listen and to see if it passes or doesn't pass and the pros and cons about it. So I tried to get Maine legislature to be televised. And so we could get the dialogue, people could understand what the bills, what they're doing. And unfortunately, both parties didn't want it. They don't want the Maine people to see what they're doing behind closed doors.
Why?
Because all the little fun stuff I talked about earlier would have to go away.
And
you couldn't be making deals with lobbyists. Everything would be transparent, would be in front of you, and they just don't want that.
That is so. I mean, it's so despicable because you're lying to not only the citizens of Maine. I mean, you're lying to the voters if you aren't willing to let them look in at how legislature laws are put into place and all that. I mean, that's just. I think that should be a no-brainer.
I had a public broadcasting company out of Lewiston. They were ready to put in all the equipment, the cameras. They were going to put the money up. We had to spend some money to be able to get the technology in. And the Democrats and Republicans, this was not one party, not the other. They were both parties refused to do it because then they would be transparent. Everything would be in the public's eye, and they don't want that.
Was it widely denied by both parties, or was it?
Yeah, no, it was widely denied. In other words, it never got to a vote. That's how bad it. Nobody wanted it, and they didn't bring it to the floor for debate.
I mean, to me, that sounds like something that people would generally really want. What can people do about that if it's not moving?
They can demand it. They can demand it. This is a good time to do it. You go to the candidates right now and you say, we want to have a C-SPAN system in the state of Maine, and are you going to vote for it? And if they say no, then you have a choice not to vote for them. Mm-hmm. That's the only way it'll get done. You got to pressure the politicians early on before they get there to make sure they'll get it done. Right.
Yeah, that's But so turning gears a little bit, back to your terms as governor. If you could do anything over again in your 2 terms, what would it be?
I think the biggest failure was not getting energy. I would put a lot more effort in reducing the cost of energy, and I'll tell you why. Maine has 18 million acres of forest land. In order to make a living off the forest, you need paper mills, you need sawmills, you need wood products is a very, very capital intensive industry, and it takes a lot of energy and expensive energy. If you've seen the paper companies have left Maine because it's too costly to do business in Maine. If we had affordable energy, if we were competitive with Georgia and Minnesota and Wisconsin, we would be having paper the paper mills would come back to Maine and sawmills would come back to Maine. That to me is a very, very critical industry for the state of Maine. And you work in a paper mill now, you're working with computers. Everything's a joystick and a computer. No, there's no physical, and these people are making $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. This is big money. And so I would say that the biggest failure was the inability to lower the cost of energy.
And you said what to me sounded kind of like it's just a golden goose sitting across the U.S.-Canada border that we're just looking away from.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Right now, the province of Quebec has over 40,000 megawatts of electricity to sell. Maine, on an average day, uses 2,400 megawatts. So think about that. 5%. We could buy our energy from Canada. It was only 5% of their total generation. The answer is so simple, but the oil industry, the gas industry, the wind industry, and the solar industry come at you and they throw millions of dollars against it. I was watching this debate until the courts struck it as unconstitutional, this referendum on the transmission line. If you sit down and look at the facts, it is clear cut that it's a benefit. It's so clear cut, it's unbelievable. It suppresses price increases. It's going to give jobs. It's going to create some taxes. And yes, the power is going to go to Southern New England, but power that we buy right now is from Southern New England.
Right.
So it's feeding your nest egg. And so the additional thing about this particular line is the right of way is very wide. You could put another line right next to it and just buy electricity for the state of Maine. If the legislature would get rid of this stupid 100 megawatt limitation.
Right.
So is the main corridor going to other states in New England beneficial for us in any way? Because you're saying you're sending it to where you're buying it from, or
yeah,
is that
sending
just...
it to where you're buying it from. New Hampshire had an opportunity to do it, but it would have to go over the White Mountains, and they wanted it underground, which makes no sense. It's just too costly. So Maine was the lowest bidder, and so it goes down there, and then it's very complicated because it's a paper transaction, but it's a lot of paper. The electricity would never leave. The electricity would never make it to Southern New England. It's just a paper transaction. Once the electricity gets on the power line, it finds the path of least resistance, which means if it's coming down the highway and there's some houses, it goes right into the house. It's going to feed those. But because it's a paper transaction, it gets very complex. So it would have been a massive benefit to Maine. There's just no question about it. And even the experts who are arguing against it know the facts. But it's money. As I said earlier, the thing about politics and the thing about society is follow the money.
How do they convince people that hydropower isn't green? Like, what is, and that wind and solar are better than it in some way?
I'll tell you, this was on long before I came in, and we've tried to tell them what makes you think. Well, they're saying wind and solar is renewable, and once the water comes over the dam, that water's gone. But what I keep trying to tell them, yeah, but it's going to rain tomorrow, and it's going to fill up the reservoir again. It's going to snow all winter. The ice is going to melt. So it's renewable year after year. They just don't buy that argument.
Right. So you had mentioned earlier about industry in Maine, and you brought up a great point of the paper mills. Maine used to have a lot of paper mills, and a lot of them are getting shut down. My father actually worked at Madison Paper, and this company from Finland came in and bought it out, UPM, and they shut it down a few years later.
It was owned by UPM and New York Times.
Right.
And the New York, no, seriously, and they were making newsprint for New York Times until fewer and fewer people were buying newsprint, and technology came in. You're online, and so that's what has affected some of the paper. But there's so many other things that you can do. For instance, in recent years, you saw this big push for plastic. Everything's plastic. Containers, plastic. You couldn't even. In fact, they outlawed before COVID. You couldn't get a plastic bag in a store. Had to be paper or cloth. So that's coming back. So that whole industry is going to be coming back. So there's so much we could be doing, but we just refuse to. I'll tell you another one that's a major energy user is technology. Texas Instrument in Portland's a major user of electricity. So electricity, we're not going to reduce it. We just got to find a way to make it cost effective and clean. And hydro is much cleaner than oil.
A lot of young people are fleeing the state, as a lot of the more the better jobs are out of state. What is your opinion, and what do you think we could do to start getting more of these new kinds of industry in Maine? We have the paper industry and fishing and all that. Those are the two big industries in Maine, and then trucking from Canada. If we were to try and attempt to get more new industries in the state, what would you do about that? How would you do that?
I do that with the infrastructure of our internet system. It's got to be stronger. We have to go to high-speed internet. It's not through the whole state. It's only in parts of the state. I think reducing your energy costs and your taxation is really, really critical. If you look at Florida, no income tax. Texas, no income tax.
Right.
Those are the big growing states. No taxes. So what they've done in Maine, if I was in Maine, and I've tried to do this, and it was because we didn't have enough control of the legislature, we couldn't get it passed. We got some reductions in the income tax, but not all of it. I believe State of Maine should eliminate the income tax. They should increase the sales tax a bit, eliminate the income tax, and let people keep their money totally.
Right. So, you're obviously, you sound very much against tax. So if we were to do away with a lot of these taxes, how are we going to pay for, the infrastructure of the state?
Well, I'll give you an example right now.
Okay.
The heritage, the land trust in the state of Maine have over $19 billion of property and real estate that is tax exempt. Why don't they pay property taxes on that? They don't have to pay income tax, but they can pay property tax. That would help all the communities. The state would not have to fund the communities' revenue sharing, so that would go away. You right size the state for what it needs. We got 1.3 million people. Where a state with 1.3 million people should operate with about 10,000 employees. That's the formula.
Right.
We're at 14,000. So we're a third higher than, a little over a third higher than we need to be. So these are the type of things I'm talking about. You can reduce it. We don't need 14,000 employees. We simply don't need it. Why? Why is it up to 14,000? Because this governor promised the unions jobs.
Wow. Yeah.
Called votes.
But it's coming out of our pockets.
It's coming out of your pocket.
Speaking of income tax, what is the balance for what's acceptable for income tax? Because I don't think that's going to go away. How much is acceptable? How much is too much?
Well, being the number one and number two highest income tax in the United States is too much. If you were to be an average, if you were to be, let's say, competitive with Massachusetts, you'd be at 5%. I think my last budget was 5.75%, and Mills threw it out and used that money for Medicaid expansion. I truly believe that if you have New Hampshire, no income tax at all. Vermont has about a 6% income tax. Massachusetts 5.35. Connecticut's about 5.1 or something like that. So my point is, if your surrounding states, those that you compete against, have a lower tax than you are, you're at a disadvantage.
So
in particular, the fact we're further away from the market.
So what is your opinion on people that, they'll go and buy a house in a state that doesn't have income tax, such as Florida and or New Hampshire, and they claim that they reside there 6 months out of the year just to avoid paying income tax?
Hey, listen, as long as the law allows it, then they should be able to do that. My point is, if you had a 5%, I have a gentleman that told me, if your income tax was 4%, I would never move. I'd stay right here because I love the state of Maine. But I have to live in New Hampshire because you're taking 8%, twice as much as what you're entitled to, in my mind. And so he lives in New Hampshire. If he was in Maine, 4% would be millions of dollars from this man because he's a billionaire.
Do you think the income tax is what detracts people from moving to Maine?
Yeah, the income tax is one. The income tax and the death tax. We have a death tax, which means that you die, the state gets the money, not your estate. That's wrong. That one there it's almost laughable because all the rich people have moved away because they're protecting their estates. But if they were here and you didn't have that tax, they'd be here spending their money here.
Right. So you think this ultimately hurts the state of Maine?
Oh, it clearly hurts the state of Maine. When we got rid of the income tax on veterans, I tried to get rid of income tax on the elderly. Anybody who was retired on all pensions, I was unable to do that, but they did give me a tax. They eliminated the income tax on veterans. And within 2 years, like 3,000 veterans retired to Maine.
Oh,
they're
that's
all
good.
I get thanked all the time for people that say, thank you for not taxing my pension.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, we need to do more for our veterans. Definitely.
Right. And it makes sense that people would want to come to the state of Maine. I mean, it's beautiful. It's
a beautiful state.
If it makes more economical sense, you can't fault someone for going somewhere else and keeping the money out.
You can't. I mean, they have to look after their estate, their families. And like, I have 2 kids and I have a house in Florida because I'm back in Maine now and I'm paying taxes. I've always paid taxes in Maine, but the house in Florida for us was for a winter retreat because we're getting older. In the winters, I don't ski anymore. I'm not a snowmobiler, so I like the summer sports, and we go to Florida in the winter. But now I've moved back to Maine because I really think Maine needs somebody that can understand government and understand how to fix the dilemma we're going to be facing. Right now, come January, when the legislature come back, they're going to be $1 billion in the red.
Really?
$1 billion in the red.
That's crazy. That is honestly crazy.
Part of it is COVID, but a lot of it is a governor who spends.
You've made it clear that you don't really like Janet Mills. So
I don't like her economic policy.
Right.
I don't know her as a person.
Oh yeah.
I truly do not like her economic policy. It's very socialist.
Maine is very much a tourist state. That's where a lot of our revenue comes from. A majority of our revenue comes from tourism in the summertime.
You got it.
And in the wintertime, there are people that come up to Sugarloaf and they ski, out of state. And then in the winter and then in the summertime, they're up here on the lakes. They're enjoying life. Do you think, we're the state of 1.3 million people. We got 3,000 cases of coronavirus. Do you think that Janet Mills' policy is too extreme?
Yes. I think what she should have done, I think the model that was used in South Dakota is the model we should have used here. We should have done it by counties, county by county. If you have a hot spot, shut it down, figure out how you can fix it, clean it, and get its, get the what do they call it? Flatten the curve. Get into an area, a hotspot area, flatten the curve, and then gradually reopen it. What she did is she did the one size fits all for the entire state. And so by shutting down the entire state, she shut down counties that didn't need to be shut down. That's what I mean about policy, the policy that she shouldn't have done. I think Cumberland County, York County needed to be shut down for a time. I think she made a big mistake in the nursing homes, because when I left in 2019, in January 2019, the budget we handed over was giving a big increase to nursing homes because the minimum wage had gone up. They needed an increase in resources. She took that away. So when Corona hit, they didn't have the resources for the PPP. And so they did without, and much of the deaths that we incurred in Maine came out of nursing homes.
Right. We live in central Maine, Isaac and I do. We don't live too far from Waterville, actually. And, we have little to no cases in this area. I think there was one scare in Madison. There's nothing. And we're on, basically not a lot of people follow it, but we're supposed to be on lockdown. We can't go into many places without masks. And I think it's crazy because there's no cases, right?
Yeah. So I'm bartending this summer 3 days a week down in Booth Bay Harbor.
Right. And
Booth Bay Harbor usually has got people, wall-to-wall people on the streets. This year, it's a ghost town.
Right.
We're operating at about 50% of what they normally would. And most of the people are actually Maine people who aren't going out of state because they don't want to have to quarantine coming back. So they stay within state and they're vacationing within state. Thank God for that, because the tourist industry would be completely collapsed.
So economically, do you think this is going to have negative long-term effects on the state's economy?
Yeah, I think it's going to take 3 years to get over this.
Wow, that's crazy.
The next 3 years are going to be bad. And I think what she's going to do, which I'm urging her not to, is she's going to repeal the tax decreases. And the minute she does that, the economy is going to spiral downwards again. Right. So it's going to be a double, it's going to get hit a second time. Turning
the tides once again, something that was legalized in the state not long ago. I'm definitely against it, but marijuana, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. It's just putting another vice into the tank. Let's put it this way. They're not getting the revenues they thought they would, because with the tax on the marijuana, now it's cheaper to buy underground marijuana than to buy the legal marijuana. Yeah. And it's easier to get because you can get it on every street corner.
Right. What is your feeling on the drug on it or other drug uses?
I'm very, very fearful that we're going to lose a whole generation through the opioid epidemic, the heroin, I just think it's a real crisis. It's a big crisis. And we've had it once before. Many people don't remember. Of course, many people weren't around. But in 1918, we had 100 years ago, we had a crisis with drugs, with heroin and opiates. And what they did is they came out with a drug. We have oxycodone now. Back then, they came out with a drug called morphine that was not addicted. They had the same argument. And then 100 years later, we came out with oxycodone and the oxys, and they said, oh, they're not addicting. Guess what? We've repeated it. We repeated our same exact fault.
So
Back then, however, it was rich people that were dying, not just everybody on the street. It was people that were getting addicted to, it was the upper middle and upper class people were experimenting with heroin. And then they came out with the morphine, and then they started experiencing with morphine. And then it took about a decade to clear that up. We were well into the Great Depression before they got a handle on that epidemic.
So are you suggesting that the marijuana legalization is just getting us closer and closer to that same sort of problem?
Yeah, I think marijuana, the problem with marijuana, I do believe is a stepping stone, because people that experiment will use marijuana, then they'll try a few pills here, or they'll snort some coke or other things as experiments, and that's where the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in moderation, everything's fine in moderation, but some people push it too far. Alcohol, same thing. Alcohol in moderation is okay. People become addicted to it, and they become alcoholics, and they die from it.
One thing I've tended to notice is even with drugs and stuff that aren't addictive, I've noticed that people, they'll try it and they won't necessarily be addicted to it, like they won't be dependent on it, but they enjoy it. So they'll go back again and they'll go back again.
Right. Well, let me tell you one guy. You probably never heard of it. You may have, if you follow sports, you may have heard the name. Len Bias. He was the first round pick for the Boston Celtics back in the 80s. First round pick.
Right.
And that night, they made him a big offer. The very first night he got drafted, he went out and he tried coke, and he died.
Wow.
He overdosed that one time. So they're dangerous.
Maine has a huge drug problem, though, and I know that the government has been really pushing. The high school that Isaac and I actually went to has bad drug problems, and there's surrounding schools that have terrible drug problems, and it's terrible to see that these kids, these young students, these young people are getting involved in this really bad stuff, and it's a shame. What do you think that the government should be doing to make sure this doesn't happen?
Well, I'll tell you, there's only one way, and that's hardcore treatment. And what we did, and I don't know if it's even completed yet. Before I left, we got in Wyndham. We were going to put a facility in Wyndham, 200-bed facility, to help empty our jails of drug addicts and getting them to the process of reforming. Right now, what they do is they give you an option to get clean or go to jail. Well, it didn't work. So what I think you do is you put them in jail, and then you want to get out of jail, you got to go to the rehab. I think that would work better. They got to have a taste of the hard life before they get the easy life.
Yeah.
The other thing is these drugs that are out there now, that Narcan and these type of drugs, that they're false security. I don't think they save lives as much as they extend life. Because I've known of 1 year, we had 568 doses, and they were given to like 40 or 50 people. So that means that some people had 10 doses, 12 doses, 15 doses in the course of a year. So is that saving a life or is that just extending it? Because someday you're going to be 5 minutes late.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we have that's now legal in the state. They actually just recently raised the tobacco age to buy tobacco products. It started out in Maine and it became a federal law. What is your take on that?
My take on that is this: you can't buy cigarettes, but you can buy marijuana.
Yeah. One thing that I say all the time is if you can fight for your country, you can buy a cigar or maybe some cigarettes. But I think that's pretty bad. Why do you think that they're pushing so hard to raise ages like that in a free country like this?
Socialism. The people pushing that are the Democratic state governors and the lockdowns around the country. The major lockdowns are all in Democratic-run states. The Democratic Party has gone towards a socialistic platform, while the Republicans are still trying to hold on to capitalism. And I think that's why the divide is getting wider and wider between the two parties, and that's why politics is getting so nasty. I tell people now that if you get into politics, be aware it's a blood sport. It is vicious. It's a blood sport. And it always has been, but it's getting worse. And it's because the divide is getting wider and wider. Ultimately, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there's a challenge to our Constitution at some point in the future. I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime, but I do believe it's coming. I think you're seeing it. You're seeing it now with the rioters. That's just the beginning of pulling statues down, right. Eliminating history, changing our history. Look, you should learn from history. You should learn from your mistakes. We made mistakes. Let's remember them and let's not repeat them. But if you eliminate it and the next generation doesn't know it happened, they're going to keep doing it.
Amen. That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Wish more people thought like you. So a question that we actually had was about, on Maine.gov, it says that you're very persistent on creating charter schools. Why charter over public?
I believe that every child learns differently.
Right.
Some learn with their hands, others with their eyes, others with their hearings, some with their mouth, and some overuse their mouth. And I've done that many times.
Yeah.
My feeling is that all of the above, whether it's technical education, whether it's academic education, whether it's in the sciences, whether it's a public school, a private school, a religious-based school, a charter school, I don't care. As long as it meets the needs of the child, that it's not about the teachers, it's not about the system, it's about the children.
Yeah.
And what's best for the children is what we should be providing.
Yeah, 100%.
It should be a family affair. Education should be what the family needs and wants.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think Isaac does too.
Yes.
So our final few questions are related to national government. And you didn't always support Trump, did you? President Donald Trump?
No. Early on, my first choice was Chris Christie. My second choice was Jeb Bush. Yep. And one night I was sitting with my wife talking, and I said, I'm sensing that the country doesn't want a politician. And my wife looked at me and she said, well, I'm voting for Trump. She says, I think he's going to be the next president. This was way early when there was a whole bunch of them in there. And so I started listening to him, and he convinced me. I think we needed a businessman, and I think he got the economy really humming strong until COVID hit. I think big mistake is we should not have shut down the entire country the way we did. I don't think we'd ever do that again. I think we've learned from that little mistake. However, I think he's done a good job.
Yeah,
I look at everybody. Oh. I look at the election right now, and I'm deathly afraid of Biden and what's happening. Kamala Harris is a socialist. She's very, very progressive. Biden has lost his edge. So I think if he's elected, she'll be running the country. And then every secretary is going to have his own little government, his own little fiefdom, because there'll be nobody at the top.
So are you Trump's been widely criticized by the media. He gets a lot of unfair press. Do you agree with that statement, or do you think he brings it on himself?
Absolutely. I think, let me put it this way. I was Trump before he was Trump. In the sense that when I was governor, I never believed that I got a fair treatment from the written press. And I separate written press because radio is a little different. If you're on there, then it's your words they're using. And so you're open to interpretation. So radio's not as bad. TV is very, very difficult for them to play games with you unless they take 7-minute sound bites and then they go off on a tangent, which I've seen happen. You get the CNNs of the world, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow. Rachel Maddow used to hate me.
Yeah.
And so that's fine. Like that's out there. That's fair game. You got to deal with it. But once you get into this gig, you got to decide. Don't be wishy-washy. Have a plan. Stay to your plan. Some are gonna like it. Some are gonna hate it.
I think that's why Trump's so liked, because he's very consistent. There are interviews from the 80s and the 90s of him talking about the same things that he supports still today. And you have Democrat politicians like Joe Biden, for instance, who in the 70s was saying something completely different than he's saying now.
Exactly. Completely different.
So who are you voting for? You know what I mean? Like, is this the same guy? But when we were preparing for this, we saw that Rachel Maddow. We saw a lot of Rachel Maddow clips. A question that we had was, there was this clip of the email. You guys are going back and forth, and someone was typing back some really funny things, and she was getting really really mad. So
yeah, my press guy, communication guy, Peter Steele, used to write back to her, and at one point he says, "Rachel, you must have something for my governor." He said, "For my guy, because you're calling all the time." And that was the last time she called him.
Yeah, I mean, you've been on Fox a couple times too, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cavuto and I have a pretty good relationship. Carlson and I, he's pretty good. He's here in Maine.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson.
Tucker's a good man. He's a real good. He's one of my favorites.
You ever been on his show before?
Yep.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I've been interviewed one time on it.
That's cool. That's really cool.
And then Laura Ingraham, I've been on that a lot of times.
That's really cool. Well, I hope you'll be back on there soon talking more. You recently had a conversation. You actually were at that press conference with Trump, and you were talking. I saw that clip on YouTube.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate with Trump. Once he got elected and he came up to Maine, he really worked hard to get Maine in 2016. Once he got one of the electoral votes here, I'd met him 4 or 5 times. So the first year, 2 years his first 2 years, I was governor, and so we worked pretty well together.
That's really cool.
He got mad at me one time. He did. I got in the doghouse with him when I wouldn't run against Angus King, but.
Yeah, I mean, I read somewhere that you had an opportunity to be in his cabinet. Was that true?
Well, I had opportunities to go to Washington, yeah, and I just didn't want to live in Washington. I wanted to work for the administration, but I wanted to be more of an ambassador, diplomatic corps, and I just don't want to be in Washington.
Why didn't you run against Angus King?
I didn't want to be in Washington. It's that simple. I really confident I would have beat him, and I just didn't want to be in Washington. I've been to his office in Washington. It's a horrible office. He's got one of the worst locations because he's an independent.
One of the things I've noticed is, when we talked, you seem very human. You seem just like a regular person going into politics, trying to help out. And so I think the thought of don't want to go to Washington is a very real one, a very good one, even though it might have been unfortunate for the state. You're a real person. Your life matters too,
Yeah, and my wife, I mean, she made a lot of sacrifices, and the family made a lot of sacrifices when you become a governor. And she said, if you want to do it, you can do it. But I really don't want to live in Washington either. And frankly, early on in our marriage, I was with Scott Paper Company. The reason I left Scott Paper is they wanted me to go to Philadelphia to work. from Maine to Philadelphia in a corporate office, and big promotion. But we decided to leave the company because I didn't want to go to Washington. I didn't want to go to Philadelphia. We wanted to raise our children here in Maine, and we did. And so going to Washington's a little bit beyond our pale.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand you. Like you said, politics is a different game. It's a totally different game in Washington. So,
unbelievable.
The ads that they
I'll tell
play,
you,
everything else.
I got my taste the very first time I got interviewed nationally. Man, you think they're bad in Maine. These people, they're very nice, and you think they're your friend, and they just have daggers all over, and they push them in one at a time.
Well, hey, this has been a great interview. We want to thank you for coming on.
You're
we really
very
appreciate
welcome. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we did too. We hope everyone at home. We hope everyone at home listening really enjoyed it, and yeah. So we'll see you guys all next time. Hey, I'm Gage from the Midday Mumbles Podcast. I strongly believe if you want to start a podcast today for free, you need Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. And the best part is, it's completely free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer anytime. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard across all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more epic platforms available for free. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started today for free. Again, that's Anchor.fm. One more time, that's ANCHOR.fm. I can't wait to see what you create. Well, I want to say thank you guys all for listening, all you guys at home. I hope you guys really did enjoy this interview. This interview took a very long time to schedule. We've been going back and forth with LePage's team for over 6 months. So I want to say a huge thank you to LePage for coming on. I want to say a huge thank you to all you guys for listening and supporting the show. Isaac, I think we're going to end it all here for today.
Yeah, that was a good episode.
Good episode.
Worked out well in the end.
So I'm going to say until next time, guys, I've been Gage.
I'm Isaac.
And we're signing off.
See you later.